Jessie. Here we go. Full name.
Jessica Rachel Hastings.
Oh. Once upon a time, Jessica Florence.
Yeah, that was mine.
Tell me about your husband getting married.
We met when I was 23, I think, at a party. Then we were kind of like together ever since. Engaged 6 months after that. And then married 6 months after that in Bali. Now we will have been married 4 years this year.
And you have a little girl?
Yep, Juniper. And I saw on the Bonds baby contest that there are now 5 Junipers younger than my Juniper, which makes me feel like I started the name and now everyone's copying me, and I'm really sad.
They're definitely copying you. What's your favourite thing about Ben?
He's actually just a really good guy.
Yeah.
I think that's probably my favourite thing. He's really kind.
Tell me about sleeping with the Benami.
Sleeping with the Benami is my Instagram account coping mechanism for how bad my husband is to sleep next to. When we first started getting married, I'd get like hit in the face while we were sleeping. But the other night, I was just telling my girls backstage, I woke up and I heard this noise and I was like, what is that machine? And then I turned around and it was Ben and he was like...
Tell me 3 positive things about yourself.
I'm really good at making brownies. I have phenomenal, like, Spider-Man reflexes, which I feel like no one ever sees, probably because they're so fast. But someone saw it the other day at church. I caught something from my peripheral vision and they were like, that was amazing. And I was like, can I get that in writing? And I'm good at writing some of the time.
Yes, you are. I'm so glad you said that. Okay, so I was about to say anxiety is your thing, but I feel like that's like pretty funny. But that's been obviously something that is huge in your life, and you're definitely a voice for it. Tell me a little bit about that.
I was diagnosed first when I was 24, and I just remember after I'd received the diagnosis, looking over like social media and stuff, just looking for anyone that was talking about it that would make me not feel like I was crazy, and I couldn't see anything. It was probably one of the only times I've ever felt convicted about anything in my life, and I felt God was just like, why don't you talk about it? And I was like, sure. Okay. I think a huge part of it for me was like normalizing it to myself and the people around me, and familiarizing all of us with like the dialogue around anxiety, like medication and therapy and all the other parts of anxiety, because there are so many different aspects of it, and making it seem less scary and stigmatized. And so I try to be as open with people as possible. I'd rather there be some good coming out of it, even if that means that it's uncomfortable for me to talk about it.
Yeah. What's the earliest memory of anxiety that you can remember?
I was probably 14, and at the time it was definitely misdiagnosed as something else. But now that I know what an anxiety attack feels like, I'm like, oh, that's what was happening the whole time. I remember being on like MSN chat. I'm going to be really sad that people watching this don't know what that is. And it just kind of hit me like something fairly traumatic happened when I was in my early high school years, and I felt like my body was like collapsing in on itself, and I crawled into bed and I didn't get out of bed for 2 days.
When did you start to realize that that wasn't just like an episode, like that wasn't just a one-time thing, but something that was continuing?
Around when I got diagnosed, so like 23, 24. That was right after Ben and I had just gotten engaged, and we had been away in Ireland for a month, and I had met like 1 trillion people, and I'm an introvert as it is already. And so I'd met so many people, I think I was just super operating on empty. And then I came home and I had a birthday party, and I felt like my body was like, you probably shouldn't go to this. But I was like, no, I'll be fine. And then I went to the birthday party, and then after it, I just cried and couldn't stop crying for like a week straight. To the point of like tears were gone, and then I was just like, like nothing coming out of my body, still just convulsing.
Did you feel like your face was sore and like your body's like you've just like done a marathon?
Yes.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
And then I went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, oh, well, you have an anxiety disorder. First, it was a socialized anxiety disorder that kind of morphed into a generalized anxiety disorder, and I would say I exist between the two.
What's interesting to me is that, like, so you have your earliest memory is when you're 14 and then your diagnosis is when you're 23, 24. So that's like 10 years of what, like confusion or?
Yeah, yes. Because now I know how diverse a panic attack is. Mental health is like so untalked about. If I'm done in my head, but I can't get a break, my body I'll get sick. And I think that kind of started to happen in that chunk of time where I just wasn't dealing with what I needed to deal with. I think I started to get physically sick. But yeah, I think for a really long time, I went to like neurologists and got MRIs and CAT scans and all these things because people were like, oh, she has this really rare form of migraines. And I was medicated for it and it never went away. I'm positive that's what it was. It was just misdiagnosed all along.
Yeah, wow. And then you say that it was after you and Ben got married. And so did he play a part in you going and receiving like a diagnosis? Like
I'll go through phases where I'm like, I'm 100% fine. And he'd be like, no, you're not. You should go to the doctor. Right. And then I'll be like, no, I'm really fine. And then a week later I'll be like,
right.
So he's I think there are people around that are good to listen to, for sure.
And who can see things that you can't see and, can lead you towards getting help. I feel like the environment that we're a part of and, like, the community that we belong to and so on, sometimes we can steer away from labeling things. And we can almost be like, that's a negative and it empowers the problem or the issue, which is definitely something that I've spoken over people and so on. But for you, what was the importance of actually getting a diagnosis and how did it like lead you into getting help? Having
a name for the face of it was kind of like realizing I wasn't crazy. And I think that's actually one of like anxiety's biggest grips is that it's so irrational. What you're feeling is so irrational. And when you're not feeling it, you who have had like when you felt it, in retrospect, you're like, that was crazy. And you don't really want to talk about it because you're like, I sound crazy. Labeling it shaped it differently in my mind and allowed me to take the crazy hat off my head and put it on anxiety.
Yeah. Okay, bit of fun. Can you like describe what a panic attack
physically?
No.
Okay.
Describe them in gifts.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
This one probably because he is like walking into a situation and something's dead in the corner and then everything else is on fire and he's like, what the heck? And that's what the inside of my brain feels like in a panic attack.
Are you holding a pizza at the time?
Yes, probably because I start eating like a pregnant maniac when I'm having an anxiety attack. And then that's anxiety. The Rock is anxiety punching Vin Diesel in the face. I'm Vin Diesel. And then
I'm
that
fine.
one. Yeah. Classic Russ. I'm fine.
Yeah.
With a high squeaky voice. I'm fine.
See, what everyone needs to understand is that the very like basis of our friendship, the foundation of our friendship is our common love for friends.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And bread.
And bread. And eating bread. Carbohydrates. Are there certain trigger points? Like other things
for sure.
Yeah.
I'm positive my anxiety comes down to like a control issue. So anytime plans shift, I'm so any kind of change, anything like surprises, if I'm thinking I'm going to someone's house and it's just going to be us and then I get there and there are like other people that are there that I hadn't mentally prepared myself to see, I'm like, maybe I need to take something. I'm like super worst case scenario, so I can spiral really quickly down like a dark hole as far as thinking goes, and that's like probably quite a bad trigger of mine. Anything to do with control or like the serious lack of it for me would be my main trigger. So anything from even like Junie's daycare's closed for a day, I'm like, oh my gosh, the world is ending. Or like Ben, if his schedule is like up in the air or shifting around, that's really difficult for me. Probably, honestly, if I'm well rested, I can get past it better. It really just depends if I can like get a hold of my brain, because it'll sometimes just be like a slip and slide and I can't grab it. And there are other times where I could talk myself out of a panic attack.
What are the most like common misconceptions about someone who suffers from anxiety?
I think lots of people confuse anxiety and stress. And I think people who haven't experienced anxiety in all its glory probably think that people who have anxiety are just hypochondriacs who can't like deal with stress. And in a way, I get how they've arrived there, because if you haven't experienced anxiety, it actually just doesn't make sense how it makes you feel and what it does to your body, because it's such a visceral reaction that anxiety causes in you. I don't think it makes sense if you haven't experienced it. I think people think you're just being dramatic.
I had a friend who she literally would work from home, everything. She couldn't step foot out, sometimes out of her bedroom, out of the front door of her house for sure. And I definitely didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And I just thought, this girl is being very dramatic. And
Yeah.
I think there's like there's this thing again in the culture that we belong in that's like rise up above it, like you're fine and stuff, which obviously like I still believe that to be true. But I think in that relationship I actually feel like I was doing a huge disservice, because I'd be like, come on, like pushing her, like come on, you can get out of the house, you can do this, you can come to this work thing that we were a part of. And in hindsight I just see that was like not helpful. Yeah. And especially now that like even for me, like I think I can understand what it feels like, and I'm like, oh, I feel so bad.
Yeah. Like a big misconception would be to assume that you're irrational at all times. Like I think most people who meet me would probably be surprised to learn that I'm as anxious as I am, because I know before I was diagnosed with it, I definitely had like an image in my head of what an anxious person looked like. I know for me, I can like push myself to my absolute end, and no one would be able to know that I'm like dying on the inside until I get home, and then I'll collapse. And I think that is maybe a misconception. I think that people can look really, really fine, and you don't know at all what's going on. A real kicker.
Things never to say to should I say anxious person? Or someone who has anxiety?
Maybe someone.
Okay. Things never to say to someone who has anxiety.
Definitely stay away from the word crazy. That's a bad word. Also, in a church culture, it's really awful when people try to like spiritualize the reason why you still have anxiety, or being like asking if you're like praying about it, or if you've done all these different things that you've of course done. It just kind of makes you feel like a failure. Also saying things like, oh, just think happy thoughts. I'm like, oh my gosh, are you insane? Yeah. That's really bad. That was one I got a lot when it first started. People would be like, oh, have you just tried to think positively? That's the one. Think positively. I'm like...
And don't tell them, don't be anxious.
Don't be anxious. Oh my gosh. Thank you. I'm fixed now.
Yeah. How can friends and family best support?
Well, I actually asked some of my best friends this, and one of them said to be empathetic. You didn't need to understand it. And she said she tried for a really long time to understand how I was feeling, and she just couldn't, because she doesn't experience these kinds of symptoms. But she learnt to be empathetic anyway. And I would say, like, for me, the most beneficial thing my friends and family can do is give me an emergency exit, like emotionally and socially, because I just don't know. Like, there's going to be I'm going to hit a point at some stage where I'm like, I got to go. And it's going to get really ugly if I stay for longer. So I think Ben's gotten really good at recognizing those signs, and he'll be like, okay, well, it's probably time that we go. Or if we go to a party that I'm not really probably feeling brave enough to go to, but feel like I have to go to, he'll be like watching and making sure everything's okay. yeah, I think just being understanding that little things like that have to shift. Like they mightn't be able to make every social engagement, or if they do manage to make every social engagement, that they're not going to be able to stay for as long. And I think try to be as consistent as possible, because I think that seems to be something most anxious people struggle with, like changes in situations and plans. And I think just making you not feel crazy, that's a big one. Even when you sound crazy, like I know I sound crazy. The other night, Ben got home from the studio, and I had started to have like a bit of a panic attack in bed, and he got out of the shower, and I was lying on our living room floor with my feet up against a wall, and he was like, "What's happening?" And I was like, "I can feel one of my legs is longer than the other." And I could tell, I could see on his face, he was kind of like, this is really weird. He went with it so well, and he was like, okay. And he was kind of like, do you want me to have a look? Like he actually just humored me, because he could see I was feeling like I was like panicky that one of my legs was longer. He was like, oh, do you want me to have a look? And I was like, yes, please. And he was like, okay. No, they're not. But just for the record, I went to the doctor today, and one of them is longer than the other. So I was on the money.
All right, so we've talked a lot about anxiety as, this thing that's part of your life. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that does it live in your future?
My honest to God answer is that, do I think he can heal me? Yes. Do I think he will heal me? Yes. Will it be now or then? I don't know. But for a really long time I was caught up on that, and it was so unproductive for me, and it actually did such a negative thing to my relationship with God. So I don't focus on it. I know that he can. I know that he's given me methods of coping with it. Like I'm a big advocate of medication if necessary. And I think for me, I was medicated for a really long time, and it did have side effects that I didn't love. And I now just take like what we call like a spot treatment. So if I'm having a panic attack, I can take something for it and deal with it then. And the side effect of that is that I would be in some way anxious most days, as opposed to when I was medicated every day and I didn't really feel anything. There was a time in my life, like when we were getting married, I really didn't experience any kind of emotion. That sounds really bad. I really didn't experience very much, because that's just what these things do to you. But I actually couldn't have gotten through that phase of life had I not been medicated. I just couldn't function as a person on a normal level without these tablets. There are so many parts of me that I feel like anxiety has shaped, and it's not all bad. Like there are parts of anxiety that have actually benefited me and have made me like a hyper-vigilant mother and a really good writer, and it makes me empathetic to people, and I see the world differently than I did before, and I know it's because of how it changed me. It's easy to say that now when I'm not feeling anxious and I'm not having a panic attack. When I'm having a panic attack, I'm like, I never want to feel like this ever again. But when it's subdued, I'm like, there are benefits to it, I suppose, that I would wonder if I would be who I was without it. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
Especially when you talk about having empathy and seeing the world differently. That's something that I feel like I can relate to as well. Like I think when it's your brokenness and it's the imperfections and it's the things that we struggle with and that we fight that allows us to understand humanity. It's good. All right. That's a wrap. We're done. Good job. That was so good.
Oh, good.